To give us more insights on this story, Suresh K. Goel is a former Indian diplomat and is currently working on the India-China relationship in Indochina. He is joining us live from New Delhi. Suresh, welcome to the show. Indian naval officials assert that there is limited action they can take until Chinese vessels engage in overtly hostile actions. This is because the ship in question here is technically categorized as a surveyor ship and doesn't fall under the warship classification. But in essence, why is the Shi Yan 6 docking at the Hambantota port a great concern for India?
Look, the fact is that whether this is actually just a surveyor ship, it's a warship, etc., makes no difference whatsoever in terms of what the Chinese planning would be. China, my own assessment is that China having taken Hambantota on lease for 99 years in lieu of the credit that they extended to Sri Lanka, which they could not return. And therefore, the Hambantota port is completely under the control of the of the Chinese. And I really wonder if there is any international obligation on China not to use Hambantota for military activities. Therefore, number one, our concerns, which were articulated right in the beginning, when the Chinese were trying to develop the Hambantota port, have come true. It is a military activity, whether they call it military or not. It is an activity which is a direct threat to Indian security. If the ship is going to map hydrological data, if it's going to map the seabed, and therefore gauge how the passage can be controlled, it is a threat to us, number one. Number two, it clearly also demonstrates that China is not prepared to respect sovereignty and the security of others for the interest that it thinks are paramount for China. We saw that in Galwan. We saw that China did not abide by the treaties and the agreements that we had signed to maintain the status quo in the region. They did not. They simply came across because they thought it is in their interest to come across and damned the Indian concerns or the Indian security. It's therefore what we had said and what I think everybody knows, that China is the dragon in the China shop as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned.
Okay.
As far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, it is coming true.
All right. For the past 3 decades, both India and the United States have raised issue with the consistent rise in the Chinese naval activity within the Indian Ocean, like you mentioned there. If China does not stop with their activities on the ocean, what could be the diplomatic implications of that?
Huge, because any Chinese activities in the Indian Ocean could have the result of not just impeding the trade, which is enormous. Please do recall that 40% of the Indian trade passes through Malacca Straits. And therefore, Chinese activities in the Indian Ocean of this kind would naturally impact on the trade. But beyond just the trade, the maritime security, the very threat to the naval lines of command, the very threat to the security of the littoral countries is a huge issue then. And if we talk about the BRI, if we talk about Chittagong port, then you have the Godar port in Pakistan, which China has built, calling it basically as part of CPEC, but clearly a military and navy port. I think the threat to the security of countries in the Indian Ocean increased tremendously.
Okay.
At the same time, you now have developments in Maldives, which is again very, very worrisome. So we need to really work on that. You asked the question about the USA. I think the USA is now more careful in assessment about Chinese threat. And that's a reason that you have Quad and you have OSAC and all those things, because USA does have to really look at China not just as an opposing power, but as an enemy, really.
Okay, Suresh, finally, and I want your brief response to this one. Some critics say that Sri Lanka could be veering towards China by allowing Chinese vessels to be docked in their harbors. Your thoughts?
I think in most of the cases, it is not really allowing China to dock the ships in the ports, but it is the way the system has turned out to be, the way Chinese have exploited the maritime system. And most of the countries are now becoming aware of the dangers of having allowed China to go this far. So let us see how this actually pans out in the future. But I know for certain that Bangladesh is very careful now. Bangladesh does realize the implications of China in the Chinese Navy in the Chittagong port if they do decide to come over there. I do know that Sri Lanka is concerned. So let us see what happens, but it is a real concern for most of the countries now.
All right, I've been talking to Suresh K. Goel. He is a former Indian diplomat and also currently working on the India and China relationship in Indo-China. Suresh, thank you very much for giving us time today. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.